Here's what we're going to do then. So today we're going to talk about the listing presentation specifically. We're going to go through the details of how to do a listing presentation. Now, here's where I typically like to start with that is I want to give you guys, I was trying to see if I have this, I'll use this in spiral thing to show you. But so I was with a different company, and at one point, one of the managers at that company had said, I want to show the managers within the company how I teach my agents to do a listing presentation. And so we had this manager meeting that was like a 2-day meeting where we had gone up to up into Heber, and I think we were staying at Zermatt or Homestead or something anyway. And as we're there, he then proceeds to show how he would teach his agents how to do a listing presentation. And so the reason I'm starting with this story for you guys is part of what I want to help you to see and to understand is what you are competing against. When you go out on a listing, if you're competing, is typically going to be the agents are going to approach it one of 2 ways. So the one way is going to be the way this manager who has been a manager for a long time and has trained a bunch of agents from his office how to do a listing presentation. And I'm going to show you the way he taught his agents how to do a listing presentation. Now, don't do it this way. And you'll see why in a second, and you'll see that you wouldn't want to do it this way. So picture it as you're the seller, okay? I'm the agent, and I'm going to come in and sit down to show you the way he taught how to do a listing presentation. And this is what it looked like. He said, you go in and you sit down, and then he had a binder. And that's why I was trying to look around. I was hoping we had a script book or something, but this thing will work just fine. So he had this binder. So imagine that this is a binder with tons and tons of pages in it. And he sat down and he opened up the first page and he said, the company that happened to be with at the time was Coldwell Banker. So this is the way he started, was Coldwell Banker started in 1906. When there was a huge earthquake in San Francisco, and a bunch of real estate agents were running around taking advantage of their consumers. And Coldwell Banker, which was 2 guys, that was Colbert Coldwell and Benjamin Banker, decided that they wanted to create a company that was not going to do that to people. And so that was the origin of this company. And then he would go to the next page. And on the next page, he would say, we have offices located in da, 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 da. And then you turn to the next page. And when we put your home on the market, we're going to put it on 800 websites. And then he sat there, no lie, for over an hour going page by page by page, explaining the page. Now, if you were the seller and I'm the listing agent and I came into you and that was my presentation, so let me show you this thing here. And we have loans for you. So here's the different loans that we have is government, FHA, 580 plus 5. Like imagine if that's what I was doing. How would you feel as the seller? Thank you. So part of why I always start with this is because I want to make sure that you understand to some extent that's what you're competing against. Now, with that being said though, probably the number 1 question that I get asked from agents is, I need a good listing presentation. And what they mean by that is, I need a good flyer or whatever, a packet of something to give to the people. But here's where I want to say is what I'm going to show you is you are the listing presentation. So at the end of the day, kind of keep that in mind of like, you are the presentation. So part of that I would say should take into account how you dress and all that kind of stuff, meaning yes, but at the end of the day, it's going to be you going in and how you present yourself and how you handle what I'm going to show you is the ideal and the best listing presentation that you can have, not some graphics and a fancy thing that you can sit down and go talk to one by one. Now, should you have something like that? I think you should have something that you give to them, whether it's you give it to them before you go to the listing presentation or at the end of the presentation, you leave it with them that has maybe some information that you can get off of the new system we have, which is called Moxie Present. On Moxie Present has basically this stuff that people typically are looking for as to a listing presentation, which is, again, to me, it's an either you send it before you go so that they can look through and get familiar, or you leave it after you've left. Now, I don't know about you guys, but anytime I have been somewhere where somebody's given me either some stuff to review before they come or after they've been at my house and go, oh, here's a bunch of information about us, and then they leave, like, how much time do you spend looking at that after they do?
Zero.
So I partially say that because I want to make sure you guys kind of understand, like, yes, if you want to have it and leave it, like, because you feel like you should or whatever, do it. It's available. But at the end of the day, you are the listing presentation, and I'm going to show you how to go in and do this in such a way that you will set yourself apart from everybody else if you're competing on this listing. Now, the other option that you have, well, in fact, actually, let me say one other thing. So I had an agent that I have been here at Everest now training for coming up, actually next month will be 7 years, which I can't believe it's been that long, but I will have been 7 years training. And I remember an agent probably 5-ish years ago here, brand new agent, came in, went through the listing presentation that I'm going to teach you guys in, went out on his very first listing presentation with somebody that he didn't know. And after he got done, now, and this agent was young looking, so meaning not surprised that the person asked this question. Is at the end of his presentation, the sellers asked, so how long have you been doing this? And the agent said, this is my first time. This is my, you kind of like, you caught me. Like, this was my very first presentation that I've done to a seller. And they said, no, yeah, no, really, like, for real, like, how long have you been doing this? And he goes, no, really, like, this is it. Like, this is the first time. And they said, okay, whatever. But, like, we just want you to know, yes, we want to list with you. And we were just very impressed. And he thought they were saying, like, you're obviously brand new. How long have you been doing this? But they were saying it as, you look so young, but you did such a good job. Like, how long have you been doing it? So just kind of keep in mind that even though you might be newer or new, that if you'll follow this process, it's going to set you apart from everybody else that's out there. Now, so let me give you then the other way that people typically go in and do a listing presentation. Most of the time, what will happen is they will go in and they will then just start to tell the seller how amazing they are as an agent. They'll start talking about all, like, we've got all these awards over here. Look at all these awards I've won, and they'll show all of these awards and look how great we are. And there is a time for that. But they'll go in and say, I am the #1 agent in my cubicle. There's nobody else that sells more real estate in my cubicle than me. Obviously, you guys didn't get the joke, or it wasn't funny or something. What?
I thought it was.
Okay, thanks. Anyway, all right. So, but for real, like, that's the way typically usually people go out and do these presentations is look at how wonderful I am, or they sit down and bore them to death to where the person lists with them just so they'll be like, hey, we don't need to see anymore. Like, where do we sign? So that you'll shut up, right? Okay, all right. So now we don't want to do it that way. So now we're going to go through and talk about the way we should do it. So think of it this way, is that there are 2 parts to a listing presentation, okay? So the first part of the listing presentation is going to be choose me, okay? So that's the first thing that has to happen on a listing presentation is that think of it as we're trying to get 2 things to take place. The first thing we're going to get to take place is to get them to choose you. Then after that, we'll talk about price. So in essence, when you're going out on a listing presentation, what's going to happen is the first thing you are trying to get to take place is for them to choose you. Then after that, we can talk about the price of their house or the price of commission. So when I say that as just price here, keep in mind that that goes both ways in terms of the commission we're going to charge, but also the price that you would set on their home. Now, why? Why would we divide this into 2 sections like this? Because part of, and I haven't said this yet, but part of what I'm saying is do not talk about price with a seller until they have chosen. Now, again, price means either the price of their house or their commission. Why would I say that? Why should we not talk about the price or the commission until they've chosen?
You don't want it to be the only thing that you get to be their main focus.
Okay, good. So why? You're right. Why do I not want that to be their main focus?
You don't want them to list it themselves and already know everything about the house.
Okay, good. Yeah, that for sure, that is going to be part of it is I don't, especially if we're talking about somebody who's thinking of going for sale by owner. Part of what I don't want to do is give them the information. Good. Why else would I not want
You
to?
don't want price to be the determining factor of them choosing you.
Okay, why? You're right. Why?
Because price, they could either agree with the price or disagree with the price. So if they disagree with the price, they'll decide not to choose you, or that will be more.
Okay, good. And
Possible.
especially in terms of the price of the commission and stuff, right on, 100%, I would agree.
Because most of the value that we bring is not the price.
Okay, good, perfect, thank you. That's kind of the main thing that I was looking for is that this. In the consumer's mind, now keep in mind, we have different brokerages around here that will do it for very, very cheap. And in fact, there are people who say, give me $500 and I'll put your home on the MLS. So part of the reason I say there's two parts, choose me, then price. Don't talk price until you know they've chosen you, is because in the consumer's mind, what do they think the value we bring to the transaction is? For most people, what do they think really the value is?
Putting it on the MLS.
That's right. And so therefore, if that's all of our value, if our value is that it's going to go on the MLS, then why shouldn't they choose whoever's going to charge them the lowest commission, right? That's why I say, don't talk price, specifically meaning commission, but also price of their house. Don't talk about the price of their house or the commission until you know they've chosen you, because there are certain things that have to happen first in order for us to do that, which is we got to show our value. Okay. So now, in order to get them to choose me, there's 6 things that have to happen. Okay. So that's what I want to talk about first, is just making sure you understand this. Then I'm going to show you now, how do we have these 2 things come about in the presentation? Just recognizing there's 2 parts to it. First is to get them to choose me, then we'll talk price. So in order to get them to choose me, the first thing that has to happen is and some of this stuff won't surprise you guys from other classes that we've done, but when there's got to be a connection or some rapport built. Okay. So we have to have a connection or some rapport. So we got to connect and have rapport that takes place. Now I'm going to show you how all of this stuff is going to happen as we go through the actual presentation. Okay. So then number 2 is the next thing that has to happen is that they have to actually trust you. Now, here's the thing. Typically, if you go on a listing presentation and you don't get the listing, and you were to call back and ask the person, why did you end up choosing the person you chose? Typically, the answer they're going to give to you is what? That's right. I felt better about, or we just trusted this other. At the end of the day, so that's the next thing that has to happen is once we've created some connection and rapport, we then also have to get this trust. We got to create a scenario where they're going to trust me. Now, the third is related to that, which as a result of them then trusting us, they're now going to feel safe. Okay. So to some extent, like, I sometimes feel like with these 2 that it's kind of like which came first, the chicken or the egg. It's kind of this same concept here is did they feel safe and that's why they then trusted me, or did they trust me and so now they feel safe? Like it's kind of that type of a scenario. But keep in mind, that's what's got to happen is we've got to create this scenario where they feel safe and that they can then trust us, which is why they're then going to then want to choose. Okay, now number 4. The 4th thing that has to happen along the way is we then have to separate ourselves. So I'm going to just write it as yourself, but separate yourself, or we have to separate ourselves from the competition. Because again, as we said, in their mind, there's really no difference between you and anyone else. This would be the same thing for you in terms of loans, like in terms of choosing a loan officer. These same concepts have to happen in terms of an agent, because from an agent's perspective, maybe there's no difference between you and anyone else as a loan officer, right? So we've got to separate ourselves from the competition. Now, how we're going to do that then is number 5 as well, which is we have to create value. Okay, we got to create some value. And as we create value and then separate ourselves from everyone else, that's where then they are going to be willing to pay a higher commission than whatever the cheapest they could find out there, is because they see the value. The example I always like to use on this is there are tons and tons of different cars in our parking lot out there, meaning that there are some pretty expensive cars probably out in the parking lot right now. Now, why would somebody go spend $50, $60, $70, $100, $200,000 on a car when you could go buy, like, I don't know, what's kind of the cheapest vehicle out there that you could buy? Brand new. Like, what's the cheapest car? There's not a right answer, just okay, a Corolla. Okay, let's use a Toyota Corolla. How come the parking lot is not just full of Toyota Corollas? Because at the end of the day, if I wanted to go from here to St. George, wouldn't the Toyota Corolla get the job done? Like, do I need a Mercedes or whatever to drive from here to St. George? So why do we do it then? Why do we go spend tens of thousands or $100,000 on a vehicle that's just going to do the same thing that the Toyota Corolla would do?
Because the value has been built.
That's right. Because of the bells and whistles, it's going to be a little more comfortable. We see the value. So part of why I bring that up is I just want to make sure you guys understand. Sometimes we get so caught up as agents on this idea that people wouldn't pay the commission, especially. So like all last week, I was in our California offices training, and down there, they really, really struggle with the belief that they could go charge somebody 6. And when I bring up a 7% commission, they are like, oh, that might happen in Utah, but it could never happen here. Well, but I'm yet like, okay, but I'm down there and I see especially the office that I train in is in Westlake Village, which is like, there's a lot of money there. So I see a lot of nice cars driving around. I'm like, they'll pay for a nice car. So why would they pay for a nice car, but not be willing to pay a commission? And it all boils down to, have you created the value? So really kind of the biggest thing I want you guys to see from this is, and actually part of this process, Austin, is when I was learning this, I went to California and was trained in a lot of this piece that we're going to work on. And while I was down there, there was me as an agent, my broker was there. So she was there to learn how to do the presentation stuff in terms of recruiting. I was doing it in terms of buyers and sellers. There was a loan officer there to learn how to go out and get more agents to use their business. There was a financial planner and then an insurance guy. So all of this stuff that we're talking about works. It doesn't matter where it's at. But part of why I bring that up is the loan officer sat down with me and went through this same type of a process. And I remember at the end, so I'm in San Francisco in the Bay Area being trained on this. The loan officer takes me through it in a role play. And afterwards I said to him, I wish you were a loan officer in Utah because I would send you all my business. Now, what you're going to see on this is like the loan officer hadn't hardly said anything to me. All he had said really was, hey, so describe for me the ideal loan officer. And then I start talking about the ideal loan officer. And what happens then is we create this, the customer creates it in their own mind that you are what they're talking about. That's where, and I'll show you how that works. All right, number 6. The 6th thing then is then we have to close. Okay. All of that is going to take place before I talk price or commission. Okay. Once I know they've chosen me and I've done all these things to create that, then I can go through and say, okay, now let's talk about the price and the commission. Okay. So now how do we do all this? How do we make this take place? So that's the next step of this. So here's where we're going to start with is number 1. So the first thing that we're going to do when we get to their house is we want to do a thank, acknowledge, and promise. So we call it TAP. TAP stands for thank, acknowledge, and promise. So now we're specifically talking about the listing presentation right now. But if I were having a buyer come in and meet with me, the first thing I'm going to do is the same concept: thank, acknowledge, promise. Okay. And typically, when I'm starting a training class, I will do that same type of a thing. So for example, like last week when I was down in California, on Monday morning at 9 o'clock when I started class, I was like, hey, thanks for being here, guys. I know that you have busy lives and you got all this other stuff, but I promise I'm going to give you some really good information. So that's what we want to do with this with the seller. So now here's how I do it. When I get to the house, I'm going to park outside of the house. I'm going to get out of the house and I'm immediately going to have a clipboard with something that I can take notes on. I typically am going to stand up out in front of the house and just kind of look at the house and take a few notes. Now, I'm doing that for two reasons. One, I want to just notice, like, what does the roof look like? And is the curb appeal good? And are the flower beds look good? Like, I'm just kind of doing some of that. But the other reason is, keep in mind that typically the seller is probably as nervous or more nervous than you about this appointment, especially if they're thinking of selling their house, because this isn't something that they typically do all the time. So very likely that they're kind of standing by a window or something, peeking out to see, like watching to see when you show up so that they can be like, hey, honey, they're here or whatever. So for me, I like to get out and do that because it also kind of sends a message if they are looking out the window of like, I'm already at work on this thing. Okay, now, so I go knock on the door, they open the door. As I go in, I'm then going to just thank them. Hey, thanks for meeting with me. Wow, I noticed that flower bed out there. Like, who is it that has the green thumb? You know, I'm going to acknowledge something about the property. So part of why I'm standing there looking at the house and to begin with is I want to try to find something that I can acknowledge them on, of like, wow, you did a really good job on that. Or whoever painted the front door, that's a great color. I mean, whatever it is, just something you can acknowledge them for. And then promise them. I always just, hey, promise that even if we don't end up, working together, or you don't list your house with me, or I decide not to list your house, whatever, I'm going to give you some really good information that's going to help you make the best decision possible. Something like that is this thank, acknowledge, promise. Okay. Now, once I've done that, then I'm going to look at the house. Okay. So the next step is, now I want to go out and look at the house. There's one of two ways that I go about doing this. Either you have them show you through the house, or what I'm going to do is, instead of them showing me through, I may say to them, I want to discover your home through the eyes of a buyer. In which case that means I want to go look at it without you showing me through. I want to look at it the way a buyer is going to look at it. So there's not a right answer. I'm going to tell you the advantages and disadvantages to both. And I'll tell you, for me personally, there are times when I have them show me the house. There are times that I say, I just want to walk through and discover it on my own. So you decide which works better for you.
What makes the difference for you on that?
Say that
Like,
again.
What makes you decide one way versus the other?
Okay, great question. Yeah. So part of how I'm going to decide is, so first thing, let me come back to this. Remember that I said, in order for them to choose me, there's got to be a connection and rapport. So because of that, in fact, I would say this, let me even say it this way. Error, if you're going to make a mistake on this stuff, error on the side of the connection and rapport. Like, if you're going to make a mistake on this, make a mistake of having too much connection and too much rapport is part of what I'd say. So yeah, so Brielle, so for part of me on this, how I'm going to decide if I'm going to have them show me the house. If I feel like I don't have as much of a connection or rapport with the person, I am going to ask them to show me through the house. 100%. I'm going to ask them to do it. If I felt like I've got that. And so the other piece that plays into it is, how much time do I have? Meaning, if I've got another appointment after this one, and so I'm like, I need to kind of stay on task with it, then I'm probably not going to have them show me the house, unless, like I said, I don't feel like there's the connection or rapport. If there's not the connection or rapport, then I'm going to have them show me the house. Like, error on the side. I would spend them, if I don't have the connection and rapport, I will spend most of the appointment having them show me the house just to create that connection and rapport. Okay, so, so that's hope, does that answer the question for you?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. So yeah, for me, it's more just of, if I feel like, hey, I've got the connection report and I want to get out of here for whatever, like, and that maybe sounds worse, but then I'm gonna, hey, I want to discover it through the eyes of the buyer. Because here's the thing, we go through enough houses, or we should be going through enough houses, that when I go to look at their house, I don't really need them to go point out to me that, oh, let me show, oh, and little Johnny, when he got this trophy over here, like, I can go look at a room and be like, yep, standard bedroom, bless you.
Excuse me.
And, you know, there's a walk-in closet, there's not, or whatever. Like, I can do that really quickly. But again, if I feel like I need the connection report, I'm having them show me through. Okay. All right. Once we've done that, then we're going to come back and we're going to sit down, whether we sit at the kitchen table, in the living room, I don't really care. It doesn't matter. Some people like the idea of being at a table better. Others like the idea of being like sitting on a couch or whatever. It doesn't, whatever you're most comfortable. But the next thing that I'm going to do is give them the game plan. Now, for me, what this looks like is this. When I say the game plan, think of it as an overview. So I'm going to just tell them what we're going to do. So we're not actually doing it at this point. I'm just telling them what we're going to do. So there are 4 pieces to this. So the first, which this marker, apparently. The first, or I'm going to put it here as A, is needs, wants, and expectations. Okay, so needs, wants, and expectations. So what I'm going to be telling them is this. I'm going to just say, hey, let me just give you an overview of what we're going to do. Is first, I want to talk about your needs, wants, and your expectations. So I'm going to ask you a number of questions that allow me to discover what your needs, wants, and your expectations were, and then I'll share with you what I would expect from you as a seller as well. Then after that, B, I write it down here for you as marketing, but I want to make sure you understand we're probably not really going to talk about marketing the way you think of when you hear the word marketing. Okay, so but here's how I say it to them. So I would be saying, so first, we're going to talk about your needs, wants, and expectations and what I would expect from you. Then after that, we're going to talk about what do I do to get a home sold? So now notice what I'm doing right here. Okay. We're going to talk about what do I do to get a home sold? What makes me different than every other agent out there? So we're going to talk about that. What do I do to get a home sold and what makes me different? Then after that, we're going to talk about what's happening in the market. So the next thing I'm writing down here is the market. So I'm going to tell them is, so first we're going to talk about needs, wants, and expectations. Then we're going to talk about what do I do, what makes me different in getting a home sold. Then after that, we'll talk about what's going on in the market today and how that's going to affect your price. Okay. As part of that market, what we're going to do is, well, I'll wait. I'm going to go back to that. Then the last thing that we're going to do is close. Okay, so let me show you what that looks like. So I would be saying, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, thanks for having me come out. Wow, you guys have taken really good care. The curb appeal on your house, it's so beautiful. It's going to look great when we put it on the market. I just wanted to make sure you know that, like, whether we end up deciding to work with each other or not, I'm going to give you some really good information. So let's go around and take a look at the house and have you show me through and point out some of the, upgrades and things that you've done to the home, whatever. So they show me through. Come back and I can say, okay, great. Now let me just give you an overview of what we're going to do. First, we're going to talk about your needs, wants, and expectations and what I would expect from you as a seller. After that, we'll go through and talk about what do I do to get a home sold? What makes me different than other agents out there? After that, we'll talk about the market and how that's going to affect the price of your house and ultimately what price we should put on your house. And then after that, if you're comfortable and confident that I'm the right guy, I'm just going to ask you to sign some paperwork. Okay. And if I say that to them, what are they going to say when I say, okay?
Okay.
They say, okay. Now, notice what I did. Already up here, even under the thank, acknowledge, promise, I've already said to them, the curb appeal on your home is great and it's going to look really good when we put your home on the market. So I've already a little bit started to insert this. I'm assuming we're putting your house on the market. Then down here, I've said, after we go through all this stuff, if you're comfortable and confident in me as your agent, then I'm just gonna ask you to sign some paperwork, okay? Okay. So now notice, I've already sort of closed on them up here and sort of closed on them right here, okay? Now, because here's the thing. So let me come back to this. I said that the last thing that's gonna happen is the close. The natural ending to a good presentation is a close. Meaning, what you're gonna see on this is a lot of times, by the time we get through this whole process, the close is the easiest part, if you've done everything else right, okay? So, all right, so at this point, all we have done in this game plan is I've told them this is what we're going to do, okay? And I always just wanna make sure, because sometimes when I go to the next piece, people are confused of like, wait a minute, I thought you already did that right here. But remember, right here, I'm just saying this is what we're going to do. So we haven't done it yet, but we're going to right now. Okay, so number 3. So think of it this way. So when I say number 3 is going to be questions. Okay, now the questions part of this is this. This is where we're going to find the needs, wants, and so up here I said first we're going to talk about your needs, wants, and expectations. Well, now we're going to talk about their needs, wants, and expectations. So here's where I like to do with this. The place that I start on this questions is, think of it this way. Actually, let me even say it this way. You know the game show Jeopardy? In that game show, on that one they say the answers are on the board. You just have to come up with the right question. Think of this, of going on a listing presentation or any presentation, but since we're talking listing presentation, think about the presentation being the seller has all of the answers up here, and you get to get those answers if you ask the right questions. If you'll ask them the right questions, you can discover what it is that they're looking for that is going. So said another way, through asking the questions, you're going to find out what you need to do in order to have them feel safe and trust you. And it's going to create this connection and rapport. Does that make sense? So now here's how we're going to do it. So under this question section, what I'm going to do is, for me personally, I like to start out with saying, describe for me your, you can either say it as describe for me the ideal realtor, or you could say it as describe for me your past experience working with an agent or working with agents. Tell me about your past experience, whatever it is. So that's where I'm going to start with. Describe for me. So think of it this way. Under this questions section, everything we ask or talk about with them should start with either describe for me, tell me about, share with me, or help me understand. So all of these questions should start with one of those. Either describe for me, tell me about, share with me, help me understand. I want to start with that. So I typically start with describe for me or tell me about, share with me, either way, your past experience working with agents. And then from that, after they've shared with me, then I'm going to say, what did you like? What did you not like? What do you think they should have done? What did they do that you like? I'm going to just ask additional questions about that. Now, by me starting with describe for me your ideal agent, what should happen is they're either going to have something in mind, or if they are like, I have no idea, I don't even, this is the first time we've ever sold our house, so I don't even know what the ideal agent looks like. Okay, well, tell me about your past experience then. Did you use an agent when you bought the house? Yes. Okay, well, tell me about that experience. What did the agent do that you liked? What did they do? What did they do that you think they shouldn't have? Or what do you feel like they should have done? Does that make sense? So I'm just going to ask a bunch of questions about that. Now, the next thing that I'm going to ask, so again, this is all tied back to, I'm trying to find out needs, wants, and expectations. So the next thing I'm going to ask them is, share with me what you're ultimately trying to accomplish. So I want to ask them, share with me what you're ultimately trying to accomplish in getting your home sold. Now remember, all of the answers to the test are contained based on us asking the questions to get them to reveal what we need to know. Okay, so I'm going to ask, share with me ultimately, what are you trying to accomplish in getting your home sold? They should then start to tell us, well, I got a job transfer and we got to move to here. And so we just need to get the home sold, whatever it is. Now, in fact, actually, let me back up for 1 minute. Let me talk about this. I mentioned up here marketing, but I said it's not marketing in terms of like what do we do to get a home sold? Keep in mind that most of the time, most sellers don't really know or care like what exactly you're going to do to get the home sold. They just want to know that you know how to do it and that they can then trust you to go do your job. No different than like if you were going to go to the dentist and he said you had a cavity, you're not going to be like, well, so tell me how you're going to fill the cavity. Like you just trust that he knows how to do it and that he's going to give you a painkiller, that whatever. Like, you don't need to know all the details. Same with them. They really probably don't care about all of the detail here. But if they do, so part of why I say this, if they do care about it, by us asking down here, tell me what ultimately you're trying to accomplish. For them, it's going to be, I'm trying to get the home sold. I want to get the most amount of money. I don't want any as little inconvenience as possible and to get it done quick. Like that's typically what they're worried about, not worried about how many websites you're going to put it on and how cute your flyer is and all that kind of stuff. They typically don't care about that. So I'm going to ask them then, about ultimately what are you trying to accomplish? And then again, just think of, I want to continue to ask 2 or 3 deep questions on every one of these. I want to go 2 or 3 questions deep, asking additional, well, what would that look like? And okay. Now, the other things that I'm going to ask them about on this is like, I might ask about pricing. Remember, I'm not going to talk about my commissioner price, but I will ask them here, hey, share with me how price is going to affect your decision. Now, if I know they're interviewing multiple agents, I want to find out, share with me how price will affect your decision. Because if they say, well, whoever gives me the highest price tells me they can sell my house for the highest is who I'm going to list with, I need to know that. If they're going to say, well, whoever's going to cut their commission the lowest is who I'm going to list with. So, okay, I need to know that. So I'm going to ask them about how will price affect your decision and what would happen if you weren't able to get that price. How would that change things? So I'm just going to ask remember, every question here that I bring up, I'm going to ask 2 or 3 other questions to dig down deeper of what's more important, time, getting it sold quickly. If they're worried about getting it sold quickly, would you be willing to reduce the price to get it sold quickly, or is the price more important than the time? So I'm going to be just asking all these questions just again about price. Okay. And then I will also ask them then, since I brought up the timing, tell me about how the timing is going to affect your decision. Tell me what's important about that. And then they're going to start to talk to me about all of that. Now, inside of your script book, which does anybody happen to have one here with them? You do have yours? So will you can I borrow it real quick? All right, good. So inside of your script books here on page, it's on page 43, has 21 questions for the listing presentation. So you can go through, I'm giving you a bunch, some of them will be on here, but you can go through and decide like what additional questions you want to ask in there. Oh, which by the way, too, just so you know, this whole thing that I'm talking about right now starts on page 40 of the script book too. It has all of this where the step by step too. So, yep. All right. Now, so let me, the other question that's not in the script book though, well, maybe it is. I can't remember if we got it added or not now. But the one that I always end with. So I'm going to ask a bunch of these questions. Tell me about what's important with this and how's that going to affect your decision. I'm asking all of those things. The last question that I'm going to ask before I go to step 4 in this is I'm going to ask them, what is your biggest concern? Or you could think of it as what's going to keep you up at night? What's your biggest fear? What are you most worried about? but does that make sense? I want to know what their biggest concern is. Now, I refer to this, that question is designed around something that I call, you got to find the bunnies.
We love that one.
Have you heard it?
Uh-huh.
Where did
We
you
love
hear
that
that?
one.
Pace Morby.
Yes, so that's where I learned it from, was him
Oh,
too.
okay.
So actually, I used to call it Find the Booties, but I decided I liked his story of the bunnies better, because that's where I got it from too. So, one of you guys want to tell the story of what happened?
Yeah, so he was talking to a lady about like selling her house or whatever. He wanted to do this seller financing thing. Anyway, at the end of the day, she didn't want to do it, but he was like, okay, well, is there anything that I can help you with? Like, I genuinely want to help you. She was like, well, I do have this huge rabbit that I can't take with me or something like that. I need to find an owner for it. Anyways, he talks to some people, and I think his mom ended up taking
His mom,
it.
yep, it was his mom.
Yeah, his mom ended up taking it, and she was like, wow, that was really helpful. The lady, the seller, that was really helpful. Actually, no one else has ever, seemed so concerned or, genuinely wanted to help me. And so she ended up going with him anyway.
Yeah, so initially she was not gonna go with this guy. But then after he had said, well, I'll call my mom, she has a farm, she could take your bunnies. And the lady was like, really? You will check with her and see. So he calls his mom says, yes. She says, yeah, my mom will take your bunnies. And then once you're it's settled in your new place, you can get them back. And then she called him back later and said, I want to go with you. And he was like, why? I wasn't the cheapest or the most expensive, or what, I wasn't going to pay the most. And she said, yeah, but you cared about my buddies, and so I'm going to go with you. So that's the idea of this. So now let me give you the one that I had that was, and it actually didn't happen to me, but it was an agent that I had worked with and trained with. I had an opportunity to go out on a multi-million-dollar listing. So this was an agent in California. They get an opportunity to go out on a $15 million listing. They go out on the listing, and let me give you the background of this. So the lady's husband had died, and he had been like a movie producer or something like that. So they had a ton of money, but he had died. So the wife's now left. She's an elderly lady in this big, humongous mansion, $15 million house. She's like, I don't need this anymore. I need to downsize. So a bunch of agents come in to interview to get the listing. And our agent goes in and says, okay, here's what we're going to do, needs, wants, expectation, tell me about this, tell me about that, asking all these questions, then says, what's your biggest concern? Ask her, tell me what's going to keep you up at night. What are you most worried about? And she said, well, I don't know if you noticed in whatever room it was, this white carpet that was in there. And the agent said, yeah, I saw the carpet. And she said, well, that carpet was a gift from my husband. Now remember, he's just recently passed away. She says, he bought me that for my birthday and spent like $100,000 or something. I don't know what it was, but some crazy amount of money on this carpet. And she says, every other agent that I've talked to has come in here and told me they're going to put it on their office tour. They're going to do it on a board tour. And they're going to do all these open houses. And she's like, I just sat here picturing all of these people walking through my house. And I can picture that white carpet just being destroyed before I even move out. And she's like, that's my biggest concern, is I don't want this carpet destroyed. So what the agent did then is said, okay, I'm not going to put it on our office tour. I won't put it on the board tour. We're not going to do any open houses. And in fact, not only that, I will only let people come in the house that are qualified. We're going to ensure they can afford to buy your house, because who doesn't want to go see a $15 million house, right? So it's like, we're going to make sure that it's only qualified buyers who come through. And then I'm going to go down to the medical supply store and buy a box of booties. And I'm going to have those people then put the booties on when they walk through the house to protect your carpet. Now, guess who she listed the home with? Yeah. Why? Over a $5 box of booties, she listed this $15 million house with him. Now, so that's the idea of this questions, is keep in mind, that's what we're trying to do, is we are going to ask the questions around, what's your biggest concern? What are you most worried about? Whatever they tell you in here, when you come up with the solution, is what's going to have them then recognize and create this huge connection. They're going to have that trust. They're going to feel safe because of that. Does that make sense? That's the idea of this question. The whole idea of the question section is to create that connection and rapport that's going to have them feel like they can trust you and that they are safe with you. Okay. Now, any questions on that before I move to the next piece?
I think just a comment is, as salespeople, the ones that are off-putting go in with assumptions about what you want.
Yep.
And the ones who are really successful go in without assumptions and actually find out.
Love that. And that's exactly right.
That's
Is
what the
yeah.
thing is.
Go in without any assumptions and just ask the questions. Now, so on that, and I started to say this, but I don't think I finished saying it. But on this marketing piece where I was talking about, they don't really care how many websites you're going to do, what flyers and blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. Part of it is keep in mind, once you get into a relationship with them on this level, the reason they don't worry about what you're going to do in terms of marketing is because they know they now trust you. They just assume you know what you're doing. Therefore, they're not worried about the step-by-step. Okay. All right. So now then let's go to number 4. So number 4 then is what I like to put as plan of action. So what are we going to do now? What this section is going to be, here's the hard part for me in training you right now, is what you're going to say during this section really depends on what comes up down here in section 3. So whatever they talk about here, so the bunnies or the booties, I can't tell you right now, hey, you're going to go in and just tell everybody I'm going to take care of your bunnies and I'm going to go buy a box of booties and put it by the front door. Like, that's not going to work for everybody. So the plan of action is you figure out, discover down here what's important to them, what they're worried about. Then up here is where you're going to answer the question. So again, down here, if I had said to them, share with me your past experience with agents, what did they do that you liked? Well, then I'm going to make sure that I do that stuff up here. If down here I said, share with me what you think they should have done differently, and they tell me things they thought should have been different, I'm going to tell them up here how I'm going to make it different. So that's what we do during this plan of action. So, but here's how I'm going to write it down for you is basically you want to say something to the effect of this. Most agents. So you're going to kind of say, here's how most agents work, or that's probably the way I should have written it. Is here's how most agents work. This is how most agents do it. And then I'm going to say, let me tell you how I work. Or you could say it as, let me tell you how I'm different. Most agents do it this way. Let me tell you how I do it. Now, the idea of that is, again, this is where we're going to start to create this separate yourself and creating the value. Is I'm finding out down here in this section is where I'm finding out what they're concerned about, what they think should have done, how they would like to see it done in the future. Like one of the questions actually you could ask down here that I've done before is what would it have to look like for you to be willing to pay top dollar to somebody? Like I don't do that every time, but I have done that before where I've said, what would I as an agent have to do that you would feel good paying me a full commission? And they may say, well, as long as you could do da 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 da. Like I had one that the guy said, I want to list my house for X. And this was in a similar, not as hot of a market as what we're in right now, but it was in a scenario where prices were going up, not like drastic as they have been, but said to the guy, okay, we're going to list it at 6% at this price that he wanted. And I said, but if I could sell it for more than that, if I could generate multiple offers to where we end up getting people bidding against each other and the price goes up above that, would you be willing or would you be okay if I changed the commission? We did an addendum changing the commission from 6 to 7. And he goes, yeah, if you could get me that anything more than that, I would gladly do that. Well, We ended up getting multiple offers. The price went up. I don't remember if it was 15 or 20,000. It was probably 15, about 15,000. So I was like, all right, so you're good with us changing the commission to 7? Yeah, okay. So I did an addendum, changed the commission. So now I didn't do that all the time, but just like I say, there were scenarios where maybe I would say to somebody, what would it need to look like for you to be okay with paying a commission? Or the other one you can do is asking people down here, this one I did a lot more, is what would the service from me to you have to look like for you to be willing to refer me to, like, for you to become an advocate for me, that you would go help me find like the next person I'm gonna help. Like you could even ask those type of questions, not even necessarily saying that they have to do that, but like what kinds of things would I have to do that would make you feel like this guy was so good, I want to go out and advertise for him. Like you can even say like, what would the service need to be like for that when this is over, you're going to go buy a billboard on I-15 that says, this is the best agent in the world. Like you could ask them that type of a question. What would it need to look like? And then just see what they tell you. Now, once they do that, then up here is where I'm going to do this. So let me just give you an example. So let's use the example of that $15 million property, which by the way, the agent got the listing. I don't know if I said that or not, but at a full commission, 6% on $15 million because they'd go buy a box of booties for the seller, okay? Now, so up here, basically what they did then is when this lady had said, I'm concerned about the white carpet, is they said, yeah, the way most agents work is they want to put your home on the market. They want to get a ton of people to come through your house, because what's going to happen then is you feel like they did their job, when in actuality, those agents coming through the house are probably really only coming through the house because the agent goes to their office and says, hey, I promised this lady we were going to get 30 or 40 or whatever number of people coming through. And so I need you to come and look at the house. They're not really coming to look at it because they have a buyer or something. So that's how most agents work, but not me. Let me tell you how I work. And then he said, I'm only going to show your house to the people who are qualified. I'm going to go out and buy a box of booties. And like, this is how we separate ourselves from everyone else. So let me give you a couple of other examples on this. So let's say that down here, I had asked them, tell me about your past experience. And one of their experiences that they tell me about was that they had worked with somebody else before, an agent that listed their house, and then they weren't very good at communicating what was going on. Okay. So if that was their concern down here or something they had brought up, how I'm going to handle it here is I'm going to say, yeah, unfortunately, the way most agents work is that they get your home on the market, and then they either have an assistant that is who you're going to hear from. That assistant, you'll never hear from the agent again, or they put it on the market and then they just assume that you'll know if somebody comes and looks at your house, that people are looking at your house. And if nobody comes and looks at your house, nobody's looking at your house. Therefore, they assume they don't need to call and talk to you. So again, I'm trying to create this division of most agents are going to do that. If they told me they had this bad experience, guess what? Most agents you're going to work with, that's what you're going to get, but not me. Let me tell you how I work. And then from there, I would say, for me, I contact my seller and then you just, whenever you're going to do it. At one point in my career, I went in and said, I contact my seller every Friday between 10 and noon. Is I'm going to call and give you an update as to what's gone on your property. At another time in my career, I said, I'm going to call you every Monday between 10 and noon, like whenever it was. But I just said, I will call you and then you decide. So for me, let me tell you the differences. Early on was when I did it, I'll call you every Monday. And the reason I did that is because a lot of times the activity takes place over the weekend. And so calling them on Monday of, hey, let me update you what happened over the weekend. But I found that sometimes, well, for me, here's what I found. If I ever had a seller that was frustrated, it seemed like they always called me on Saturday. And so for me, I was like, I don't want those frustration calls on Saturday. So I'm going to start calling on Friday. So for me, I always called on Friday. It was kind of I'm going to call you on Friday and give you an update. And then that way for me, I had my weekend and I didn't have to worry about them calling me to be like, how come my house hasn't sold? So that's just kind of, I'm not saying that's how you do it either way. Like I say, there's advantages to doing it Monday. There's advantage to doing it Friday. You could do it on Wednesday, like whatever you want to do on that. But the key thing is I just is saying, here's how most agents do it. Most agents are going to do exactly what you're afraid of or what the experience you had, but not me. Let me tell you how I work. And then I'm going to go through and say, here's what I'm going to do. Now, so I'll give you two other examples of this, just so you kind of have some. Let's say that they were concerned about safety. Okay, so let's do that. They maybe tell you they had an experience one day of they had their house for sale and all of a sudden somebody just walked in the door. You know, they were sitting there eating dinner or something and somebody walked in to show the house and they didn't know the person was coming. If they had that experience, I'm going to say, yeah, unfortunately, the way most agents work is they're going to put one of two types of a key box on your house. Either they're going to put on the key box that's a combination one, in which case, if the client's looking over their shoulder, they now know the combination of the key box and they could access your house. Or they're going to use a lockbox that an agent could just come up pretty much at any time and open it and come walking into your house. So that's the way most agents work. Then I'm going to say, but let me tell you how I work. So my lockbox that I use actually has a code on it that's called a call before showing. Now, here's the truth. Every one of our board key boxes does what I'm talking about, but most agents don't know about it. Most agents don't know you can do this. So I present it as most agents are not gonna, they're just gonna throw the key box on, but not me. Now, I also want to be very, very clear. I do not like using the call before showing code unless I've told the seller, unless there's a reason that I've ended up telling the seller that I'm going to, then I don't just automatically do it. I want to make sure you guys understand. But in order to separate myself, I'm going to say most agents are either going to use a combination lockbox or they're going to just use the one they get from the board that anybody could access pretty much anytime, but not me. I'm going to put one on that has a call before showing code so that even if an agent drives up and sees your house, they can't go open it without the code. They have to contact me to get the code. So can you see how I would use that as a way to again, just something as simple as that, like just think whatever they say down here, you're going to look at it as like most agents are going to do it this way, but I do it this way. Most agents do this, but not me. I do this. That creates this division. So one other one I'll give you, let's say photos. If the person, let's say, was moving out of state or whatever, and I'm wanting to separate myself, I would say to them, hey, so where did you say you were moving to? And they say, wherever. Great. Have you spent any time looking on the internet at properties on websites? Yes. Have you noticed that some houses have really good photos and others, like it looks like a 5-year-old took the picture? And they're going to be like, yeah, I've noticed that. And I'm going to say, well, the way most agents work is they're going to go out to your house and they're going to take their pictures of your house with their phone. They're going to go use that. Now, the cameras on the phones can be great, but that's not the way that I work. Because as part of with Everest, just in case you guys didn't know this, one of the things for us is every listing we do, the company pays for you to get a professional photographer to go out and take pictures. So I'm going to just present this as most agents are going to go out and just take the pictures of themselves, and they've probably never been trained in photography, but not me. I get a professional photographer to come out and take your pictures so that when people are looking at your house, it's going to look like the good photos you've seen, not the bad ones. Go ahead, Tracy.
Just out of curiosity, is it an in-house photographer or is it?
No, it's a third-party company. Yeah. So, okay, so does this make sense what we've talked about here? Any questions on this piece? So like the hard part for me here is, like I said, it's a lot of times agents want to have we're on 800 websites and we're going to make flyers and we're going to, like all of that. But I'm like, that's not what they care about. What they care about is what we found out here. So take what you found out here and design around that based on. So now here's what I say. If you're a brand new agent and you're like, oh, I'm nervous of what if I still didn't know what to say, then here's what I would recommend you do. Tell the seller, hey, I'm going to do this in 2 steps. I'm going to come out and look at your house and ask you a bunch of questions. Then I'm going to go back to the office and put together the CMA, and then I'll come back and present to you the CMA. So you could come and ask all these questions and then right here say, All right, well, hey, thanks for meeting with me. I'm gonna go back to the office. I'm gonna put together your CMA. We'll get back together and then I'll show you what I do to get your home, how I'm gonna approach getting your home sold. Then I could come back, because then you could come back to the office and say to me, okay, Russ, help me do this part. And I'll say, okay, well, what did you discover down here? And then we'll figure out how to go back and say, okay, here's how most agents do it. Here's how I do it. Make sense? Okay, now. the
Hey,
next-
Russ,
Yes.
is there a pro or con to trying to ask those questions on the phone before you go? So that when you're there, you are answering all those questions without coming and going and coming and going? When setting the appointment to go
Yeah.
see their house, like asking all those questions?
It could be, I'm just trying to think, it could be fine, yes. The only thing I guess I feel like, the only reason I'm a little hesitant on it is, like, I think you could ask the questions like before going out, but then when you get out there, like maybe ask the additional dig deeper questions potentially. The only reason I'm thinking that is just over the phone, I don't know that I've really tried digging deep on the phone with it as much. So you could, I would say, I guess, yes, try it and see what you think. I think it could be okay. It's just, you gotta make sure,
Okay, thanks.
at the end of the day, Braille, as long as you've gotten the detail on it of the, like, the deeper part of this, so that you understand, like, they're really their concerns, it probably is gonna be fine. So. But again, for me, the other thing too, why I partially hesitate is I would say, as long as it's creating the connection and rapport, then you're probably good. And I worry a little bit over the phone of doing that, but I still think you could do it. So.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Any other questions, anybody? Before I go to the next step? Okay, now, so remember on this, there's two parts to the listing presentation, choose me and then price. If we've done this right, we have now satisfied the connection, the trust, the safe. I've separated myself and created the value. So if I've done this all right, they should have selected me at this point. So I got to find out though, because the next piece on here, remember, is needs, wants, expectations. This marketing piece was going to be this. So we've done this, we've done this. It's now time to talk market. Remember, market's going to be what's going on in the market and how's that going to affect the price of your home? Well, we don't talk price though until they've chosen me. So now I got to figure out, have they chosen me? So the next step is, which I usually just draw a line across here, is I got to find out if they've chosen me. So here's how I like to do it. I like to, on this section, say, so again, assuming, in fact, Joaquin, will you be the seller? Sure. Okay, so we'll assume he's the seller. So I'm going to just say, so Joaquin, how do you feel about everything we've talked about?
Pretty good so far, yeah.
Okay, good. So on a scale of 1 to 10, where are we at in terms of us working together? So 10 being yes, 100%, let's sign the paperwork, or 0 being like, no, get out of my house, you shouldn't be here.
I gotta say, probably about an 8.
An 8. Okay. Now, so whatever they say here, when I ask that question, anything less than a 10, I'm going to then ask, okay, so it sounds like you're not all the way there yet then. So what would have to happen for us to get to be a 10?
Well, I guess the only thing I'm at now is going over all this stuff with my wife.
Oh, well, I wouldn't be here if your wife's not here, so.
Probably true, huh?
So yeah, you could do that. We got to think about it if you want, but I'm saying I wouldn't be there if your wife's not there. So your wife's sitting next to you.
So, I don't know, like what's typically something they would say to you at that point, you know? You just gotta think it over, basically.
Okay, so Bowen says we need to think it over. Okay, so so I guess when you say we need to think it over, I guess, is there anything that I have said that let's assume it's now tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock, so you've had the chance to sleep on it. Is there anything that I haven't answered that you felt like I should? I'm going back and forth because I'm like, I don't know who's gonna answer me, but
No, I think you've answered all our questions.
So it sounds like as long as tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock that you still feel the same, we would go ahead and sign the paperwork.
I don't see why not, yeah.
Okay, so what if we did this then? What if we were to sign the paperwork, but we'll date it for tomorrow? And then if tomorrow morning you're not happy, you could just tear it up and throw it away. How would you feel about it?
That would make me more comfortable.
Okay, good. So now I know that's the only thing holding back. So whatever but here's the key. So on a scale of 1 to 10, where are we at? 10 being you're ready to sign. Now, notice what I'm doing too. 10 being you're ready to sign the paperwork right now. In essence, if he says to me, yeah, we're at a 10, he's also just told me I'm ready to sign the paperwork. So that's part of why I say it that way. So 10 being you're ready to sign the paperwork, 0 or 1, you could say, or a scale of 1 to 10, or a 1 being like, get out of my house, you've wasted my time. So where are we at? Anything less than a 10, I'm going to say, so what would have to happen for us to get to a 10? And what I'm looking for then is for him to tell me what would have to happen. And then from there, we can talk about it. Now, he may say, well, we haven't even talked about the price yet. So like we're at an 8 because I don't know what you're going to tell me on price. Okay, great. So let's say that you said that. I would say, so Joaquin, assuming we can come to an agreement on price, would we be at a 10 if we can agree on price?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Now, the other things that people will say, and I'm this way, typically I'm this way, is if you had said to me on a scale of 1 to 10 and I felt like it was a 10, I still probably would have said, I don't know, 8 or a 9. Okay, well, what would have to happen for us to be at a 10? And I might say, well, I don't know. I don't know that there's anything else you would need to tell me. I just always feel like no matter what somebody did, there's probably something else you could have done, even though I don't know what it is. In which case I would say, okay, so really for you, the highest I'm going to be able to get to is that 8 or a 9. It's not possible to get to a 10. And if they said, yeah, probably not. I mean, like you're there. Okay, great. Then let's go ahead and go to the next. So anything they say that's not a 10, what would have to happen to be to a 10? And then I'm going to deal with it to figure out, should I go on to price or should I not? Okay.
Russ, what if they're telling you, well, we haven't met with any of the other agents. We want to meet with the other agents first.
Okay, perfect. Great. Good question. So that's probably the only other response you're going to get from them is, well, I've got somebody else I'm going to meet with. Okay, great. So here's what I want to say to you guys. So before I fully answer that, here's what I want to make sure you guys understand. If you're competing against other agents, typically the seller is going to list with the last person they meet with. Now, you'll hear a lot of agents say, I want to be the first one to go in. And the reason they want to be first is because they're going to try to get the person to sign with them before they ever meet with anybody else. And if they can, then they listed with the last person they met with, right? So just kind of know for me, if I could give an ideal scenario, if I knew they were going to be meeting with multiple agents, the ideal scenario for me is that I'm first and last. I want to be the first one to meet with, that they meet with, but then I still want to be the last one. Now, with that being said, that's not always going to, especially if you are competing against others, you're probably not going to get a first and last. Like they may have already met with people, or you may not even know they're meeting with people, like whatever. So if they said that though, then here's how I'd handle it. So Brielle, you be the seller now. So you just said we've got other agents we're going to meet with.
Okay.
I would say, okay, great. So let's do this then. So I'm going to do everything I can to get her to list with me while I'm there. But if she still is just like, nope, we got to meet with the other agents. Nope, we got to meet with the other agents. Nope, we got to meet with the other agents. Then I'm going to do this. Remember what I told you here. What's the rule? Yeah, but what's the rule about price? I'm not talking about it till they choose me. So if I cannot get her to choose me in that moment to where she's like, nope, I got to meet with the other agents, got to meet with the other agents, I'm going to stop my presentation right here. I'm going to say, great, let's hold then until you've met with the other agents. And I'm going to say, because the next part of what we were going to talk about is the market. some of what I do within that is proprietary. And I don't want to share that with you and then have you go list your house with another agent and use my trade secrets. Therefore, I want you to go meet with those other agents, see if they bring anything up that that I haven't talked about, if they have any other questions, whatever. And then I'm going to just do everything I can to get them to promise me they'll still meet with me after that they meet with that person. So I'd be saying, Brielle, will you give me the promise that you won't list with them until I have a chance to come back and answer any questions they bring up for you and to share with you my proprietary information for getting a home sold?
Yeah,
Okay, great. So when are you meeting with that next agent?
in an hour.
In an hour. So could I come back in an hour and a half and you and I sit down and go through it?
Yes.
Okay, great. And you promise me you won't list with them, just like you won't list with me, right? Like, that's what I'll say. You're not willing to list with me right now. You got to give me the promise you won't list with them either, no matter how good they make it sound.
Okay.
Deal?
Do people like usually agree to that? I don't know
Yes.
that I would like, I mean, even if they say yes, I feel like
Yeah.
they're not
no,
gonna
you're-
be, they're not gonna be truthful in that moment. And I kind of feel the same way about even the 1 to 10 scale. Do you feel like people are really truthful with you about where they are and what their actual concerns are? I mean, I feel like that's just something I would BS through. I'd be like, no, yeah, you're great. We just need to, I'd give you like the baloney answers
Yeah. So
to get you out.
Yeah. So that's just it. Is here's what I would say to you is, if I've created the connection through the questions piece and answering this, then yes, I get the truth. If there's not the connection, then you're right. You may have somebody say, yeah, you're at a 10. Well, except for that, would be the problem with that, Brielle, because if I said to you, where are we at on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being you're ready to sign the paperwork right now, you're not going to BS me by saying 10. Because guess what I'm going to say when you say I'm at a 10? Great. Should we sign the paperwork right now then?
No, right. But I feel like I would give you like, probably like an 8 or a 9, but we have other agents we're meeting with and,
Okay,
we're
good.
meeting
So
them
you-
tomorrow or whatever. Like
Yeah.
just because once you're not in their face anymore, you have to like get back in the door,
Yes.
So
that's what, yes, you're great points, everything. So that's why I say to you, I'm going to do everything I can to get you to sign it then. But if they just won't, then I'm going to try to get a promise that they won't list. But I want to make sure you guys are all clear. When you leave without the listing, it's very likely you're not getting it. Because of exactly what you're saying, Brielle. The next person may come in and they may connect with them better and they might go, yep, we're going to list with them. But hopefully I've done this. Now, so let me show you what I would do, Brielle, though, and you tell me, and you just told me you would say yes, even if not. So don't give in on this unless you're really, truly would meet with me still. Deal?
okay.
Okay, so here's how I would handle it then. So I would say, okay, you're gonna meet with this other agent and you promise you won't list with them until I have a chance to meet with you. And you said yes, but like you said, you were just saying it to get me to leave, so fine. Here's what I would say though, is I would have said, okay, Brielle, when you meet with that next agent, I want you to ask them this question. Because part of what I want to make sure you know is that you're getting the right agent who's going to get your home sold. So I want you to ask the next agent that you meet with, how many buyers are there looking for my home right now? And if they're going to give you one of two answers, Brielle, and if they do give you these answers, that should be an indication to you that they may not be the right person to list your house. Okay. So they're either going to say there's one buyer for your house, which is true, duh. But how many people are looking right now for your house? How many buyers are there looking for your specific house right now? And it's more than one, I'll tell you that. Or they're going to tell you, well, there's a whole bunch. There's no way to know. And when I tell you I don't want to give away my trade secrets, what I'm talking about is this. I know how many buyers there are looking for your house right now. I may not know exactly who they are, but I know the demographics of who they are and I know how many there are. And that's what I want to show you. So that's why I say don't list with them until I've had the chance to show you how I'm going to go after those buyers. Sound good?
Yes.
Okay, great. So now you tell me, based on that, have I piqued your interest enough that you would want me to come back to answer how many buyers there are?
Yeah,
So that's kind of what I'm gonna do is if I am gonna leave, I have got to create enough curiosity in them that they're gonna say, well, I still want to meet with this other agent or with me after they've met with that agent. Okay? Any questions on that?
yeah, I want to know how you answer that.
I was wondering if anybody, I was gonna skip it and not tell you guys if you didn't ask. All right, here's how we do this. Now, to some extent, this, you have to think back to, I'm trying to remember, did we did needs analysis like 2 weeks ago, right? Okay. Remember it? No, it wasn't in needs analysis. It would have been in the lead generation. Do you guys remember, and I don't know if Jason did this when he did taught the class, but he typically when I teach it, I teach the buyer and seller cycle, the percolation, information gathering, and active. Is that familiar to you guys at all or no? Because I don't know if Jason covered it. Did he cover that?
Yeah.
He did? Okay. Do you remember how long the active phase is? It's all right if you don't. Okay, 45 days. Now, that changes periodically. Now, and in fact, actually, we have coming up, part of the 12-hour new agent classes are going to start in the next, I don't know, couple of weeks. I don't remember when it is, but I'm going to teach the CMA class. If you remind me in the CMA class, if you guys will remind me, I will show you exactly how, like I'll actually do it on the MLS and show you the exact process of this. But for now, I just want to explain how it works, okay? So think of it this way. If I were to go to our MLS right now and pull up the number of homes for sale. So Brielle, for you, is anybody else on from St. George right now? I think you're the only one. I think you're the only one, but so if I were to go onto the MLS and I pulled up the number of homes that are under contract right now in Salt Lake County, anybody have an idea what it would be? Or if Brielle, for you, if you went onto the Flex MLS and looked up under contracts in St. George, here's the key. Whatever the number is, and let's say, I believe in Salt Lake right now, it's somewhere around, I want to say 2,400 homes for sale. If 45 days from now, I were to go and look how many homes were under contract, how many do you think there will be? 5?
Just run out of numbers.
Look, here's what I'm saying. Here's what tends to happen is what happens is when a property is on the market as active and then it goes under contract. So today there's going to be some properties that go under contract, but there's also some properties that are closing today. So what I'm saying is the properties that close today get replaced by buyers that went under contract today. And then tomorrow, there's going to be more properties that close and more properties that go under contract. So essentially what I'm saying to you is this, the number of properties that are under contract at any given moment are going to look something like this. Like you're going to have some ebbs and flows, but there's essentially going to be about, like if you were to take it and drew like a trend line on it, it probably isn't going to be that. It's probably going to be more slightly like this. And that's probably even too steep of a curve. But the number of properties going under contract, closing every day and going under contract are going to be about the same. However many properties close today, there's going to be about that many that go under contract today. And tomorrow,
You're saying like if I went on the MLS and just did like a quick search for properties closed in the last 45 days, is that kind of what you're saying?
so yeah, yes and no. Like, yes, you could go see the number of properties that closed in the last 45 days. But more so what I'm saying is if you just kept an eye on the number of properties that are under contract,
Okay.
they essentially stay the same year round.
Oh, okay.
So what I'm saying is there are about the same number of properties, or excuse me, let's move back. Let's define a buyer as somebody who actually makes an offer that gets accepted. Like, because we've had over the last year and year and a half, we've had properties that come on the market and you get 20 offers, but only one gets accepted. So I'm defining a buyer as the one that gets it accepted. The other 19 that wrote offers on that house, they're not real buyers. And the reason I say they're not real buyers is because they didn't buy it. And so even though tomorrow those 15 out of that 19 might write an offer on a different property, only one's getting accepted. And that one I'm defining as a real buyer. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, so in a market like this, where somebody's only on the market for like 6 to 10 days, right? The number that are under contract is gonna be a lot higher than the active listings. So like,
Yes.
in all of Utah, there are 3,500 active listings, but 7,500 out there.
Right.
So like and a contract is usually what, like a month or so that it's under contract. So if a buyer is active for 45 days, it would technically be even more than that 7,500 that are in the market. Would that be like a correct analysis where?
Well, but I think what you're saying, if I understand what you're saying, yes.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is 45 days from now, there's still only going to be about 7,500 on contract. So really, yes, there are more people looking at houses. That's probably the way to say it.
Yeah.
I'm defining a buyer as the one who actually gets the offer accepted. So now with that in mind, so now that's kind of a bigger scale. Okay. So to get to a more, but does anybody have any issue with this, of the fact that like 1 month it might be 2,200, the next month it might go to 26, and then it might go back down to 22, and then 26 and 22. But essentially it stays kind of on this trend line, which the trend is going to be slightly up, by the way, slightly. Does anybody have any issue with that? So therefore, in our market at any given moment, there are the same number of buyers. It doesn't matter when it is. If you have issue with it, tell me, because poke a hole in it. Like, I'm fine with that. But if you're good with that, now let's take it down to more of a micro level. So if that's true, what I'm saying when I say this about to a seller is there is a finite number of potential people that are going to buy. So kind of to what you were saying, Bowen, there might be 10,000 people in Utah looking at houses right now, but only 7,500 are going to get under contract. So what I'm saying is, in the next 45 days, that's still going to be 7,500. But so let's go to a micro level. If I were to say the home was let's just throw it out there as a 2-story, it's got 4 bedrooms upstairs, 2 baths upstairs, and it's a 4,000 square foot home, 3-car garage in whatever area. What I'm saying is there is a finite number of people all 10,000 people out looking at houses are not all looking for the one. Or what Mercedes was saying earlier, like her mom, whatever, if it's in her price range, she'll buy it. Like,
She can't get anything.
yeah, but what I'm saying is that's not the way it typically works. Typically, the way the buyer works is they're saying, I want. So what I'm saying is there is a finite number of people out looking for a 2-story, 4 bedrooms upstairs, 2 baths, and 3-car garage on a 1/4 acre or whatever. What we need to do is figure out how many there are. So how I figure that out is I go to these under contracts. So I look at homes that have gone under contract in the last 45 days, whether they've closed yet or not. So they could still be as under contract, or they may show as sold now. But I'm looking at the day they went under contract, being within the last 45 days. And then I'm going to look for in areas that a buyer that's looking for their house would be. And now remember, I'll show you the detail on this if you remind me in the CMA class. So hopefully I'm not losing. But I'm going to go find homes that are similar to theirs in the last 45 days that went under contract. How many were there that went under contract? And what we're going to see is that there's typically going to be a finite number, and usually it's less than 10 is what I would tell you. A lot of times it's 4, 5, 6, somewhere in that range. So what that tells me is potential people, or said another way, people that are gonna buy a house in the next 45 days that their house meets the criteria for, is there are 4 or 5 of them out there. There's not 10,000. There are 4 or 5 people that are the real potential buyers, the ones who will be willing to pay the price. So like I said, somebody might get 20 offers and you might go, no, there was 20 people that would buy their house. Nope, only one did. But out of that 20, there are gonna only be 4 or 5-ish that end up getting under contract in the next 45 days on a house like theirs. Do you follow me? So what that means is there are 4 or 5 potential buyers for their house. Now, the next step on this, are you guys, everybody still good with what I've said? Okay. So then the next step for me is to go back the last 45 days and look at the ones that went under contract, whether they've closed or not yet, to figure out like, where did the buyer come from? And I don't necessarily mean like exactly where did they come from. It could include that, but part of it could be, what are the demographics of the buyer? Meaning, are they asked, and not in this current market, this isn't happening. But if I looked at the last 45 days, all the houses like that one, every one of the buyers went in and asked the seller to pay $10,000 in their closing costs, then I want to go to my seller and say, the buyer of your house is going to expect you to pay $10,000 in closing costs. So we need to factor that into our marketing. Let's go out and target the buyers based on what we know they're going to want. So let me give you one other example. The house that I always use when I teach the CMA class is my first house that I owned out west. And there was one time in particular that I was teaching the class and we were going through and I was looking at the homes that had gone under contract within the last 45 days. And I was looking at what do they all have in common? Well, the interesting thing was every single one of them had an outdated kitchen. Like this was the weirdest thing I'd ever seen. But during that time, every single house that was under contract or sold in the last 45 days had a not updated kitchen. And there was a bunch of houses that were still on the market for sale that all had updated kitchens, not a whole lot higher in price. And so, for example, what I'm saying is part of what I would wanted to do is go into the seller and say, you haven't updated your kitchen. Most agents would have come in and said, that's a bad thing. Your kitchen's not updated. But in that particular scenario, I would have been like, that's the best news ever. The buyers who are buying your houses like yours right now don't want an updated kitchen. And I don't know the answer for why. I just know all of the ones that were under contract didn't have updated kitchens. And the homes that had updated kitchens were still for sale and had been for sale. So the buyers knew they were there. They just didn't choose them. So it was kind of weird, but that's the kind of thing I want to look for is what is the demographics of the people who are buying? Like, what are they looking for in a property? And so I'm looking at the other ones to see what do they have in common, because that's what the next buyers are going to want to. So that was a very long answer to what's the value, but does that at least give you an understanding? And I'll show you the detail in the CMA class. We'll actually do it so that I can actually show you how, oh, notice this or notice that. And that's how I go about doing it. So that when I come back to the seller, I'm able to say, this is how we're going to approach getting your house sold. These are how we're going to go target the buyer. Make sense?
Yes.
All right. So now that we've done that, and let's assume then, Brielle, that you didn't list with that other agent. You let me come back. I explained that to you, and you're now going to list with me. Sound good?
Okay.
So now I'm going to go to number 5. So now we can talk market or price. So I'm going to put price here. But remember on this, what we're going to do is I'm going to start first with the macro. So I'm going to start with the big picture. So if I were to ask you guys today, what's going on in the market today? How would you answer me? Okay, good. Interest rates are going up.
Just a snitch. Just a little bit.
Yeah, just like 2% or something. But-
That's all.
So what else how else would you say what's going on in the market? Interest rates are going up.
Inventory is going. up.
Inventory's starting to climb. Okay, so that's the idea. That's what we want to do first on price, is we want to just tell them, here's what's going on in the market. Now, 6 months ago, we would have been saying there's very low inventory, homes are selling and getting multiple offers, all that kind of stuff. Like, to me, we may say interest rates are going up, inventory is starting to climb. We're still seeing a high demand for properties, but it's going to be turning soon, or it's starting to turn, whatever. That's the macro big picture. So now the next piece then that we're going to talk about on this is pricing. So the next thing I'm going to say to them is, so let me tell you how price is going to affect your decision. And then what I'm going to do is have a discussion with them about pricing in terms of how, ultimately think of it this way. We're going to now talk about how to price their home and how we want to adjust. So I still haven't talked about the price of their house, but basically what I'm going to be telling them is this, is especially based on what's happening in the market, is I would be saying to them under this macro is inventory starting to climb, interest rates are going up, which means, which is exactly what you said about your mom. What people could afford a few months ago is now they can't afford the same thing. Therefore, there are not as many people that can afford to buy your house. Okay. So whatever price we land on, we got to have a pricing strategy. And here's what our pricing strategy needs to look like. So we're going to tell them, we're going to keep track every week the number of showings that we get and the number of offers that we get. Okay. So every week when I call you, I'm going to update you as to the number of showings we've gotten and the number of offers we've gotten. Here's what we know is every 3 weeks, if we have had 0 showings and 0 offers, the price of your home needs to be reduced between 7 and 10%. We are at least 7% overpriced. If we have 0 showings, 0 offers, our price, that's the market's way of telling you you're at least 7% overpriced. And so we need to reduce somewhere between 7 and 10%. If after 3 weeks, though, we've had 1 to 3 showings per week, so I always say some showings, but really I'm looking at 1 to 3 per week is what I would define as some. So that's going to be some showings, but no offers. We need to reduce your price between 5 and 7%. Because here's what I know. Homes will sell within 4% of the, if they're within 4% of the right price, you will get an offer. If you're not within 4% of where the price should be, you won't get an offer. Part of that has to do with us as agents, is just kind of culturally, and I say culturally, but I mean culturally across the nation. Agents, if a home is more than 4% overpriced, they typically either won't show it, they'll discourage their clients from writing an offer because they don't want to write lowball offers, whatever. It's just, if you're not within 4%, you're probably not going to get an offer. So I want to make sure the seller understands that right now. I don't care. Notice we haven't talked about the price of their house yet. I'm just saying this is the strategy we need to work. This is what I know happens. Homes will sell within 4% of the correct price. Wherever they should be priced at, if you're within 4% of that, you'll generate an offer. If you're not, you won't get any offers. Now, if I listed it, let's say that the home should be listed at 500,000 and I listed at 3, am I going to get offers? And I could count on multiple offers that are going to do what? Drive the price up probably really close to 500,000. That's just the way it works. Stop it. And if you ever have a seller that struggles with this, just talk about eBay. How does eBay work? If like I used to always, I would buy an iPhone and then when the new one came out, I would take my old one and I would put it on eBay for $1. I never once sold my phone for $1 because the price will get driven up to wherever it should be. That's kind of the same thing with a house. It is not possible to underprice a house as long as you give it at least 72 hours on the market. After 72 hours, it'll sell for what the market says the price should be. Now, if you didn't tell anybody and you didn't really market it, you didn't within the first 24 hours you took an offer, then that you might be able to undersell. But typically you put it on the market, give it at least 72 hours, you will generate offers that will drive the price to where it should be. Okay. So you don't have to worry about underpricing, and I would tell the seller that. If I would explain eBay, we're not gonna underprice because we'll put it on and we'll give it at least 72 hours before we accept an offer. But if we don't get any offers, that's the market's way of telling you your price is too high. So we need to adjust every 3 weeks. Now, the market we've been in, maybe this changed to once a week. If we went a week without an offer, we need to reduce the price. Now, in 2009, 2010, I might have said to them, it's 6 weeks. We're gonna give it 6 weeks before we make an adjustment. So that might adjust a little bit, but this stays the same. Okay. All right. So once I've explained the pricing to them, then C is we're gonna go through the CMA. Now we're gonna let's look at the comparative properties to theirs. We're gonna go through and talk about those to land on what price we should list their home for. Okay. Now, real quick, back to this though. I want to make sure you guys know this is crucial to getting price reductions to have this conversation. Now, again, the market we've been in, price reductions haven't really been that necessary, but we're going to start seeing it where you got to get them. And so this is crucial. So I had an opportunity to list and sell a cabin up Big Cottonwood Canyon. And long story that I won't share with you today, but ended up having, the buyers, or excuse me, the sellers were brother and sister. It was a cabin that was, their parents had built it 60 years ago. Parents died, left it to this brother and sister. They were joint tenants on it. The sister goes to the brother, says, I changed my name. I need you to sign a quit claim deed because I'm changing my name on the title. He signs it, but what she really had him sign was a quit claim deed, changing it from joint tenants to tenants in common, with her being the 2/3 owner and him a 1/3 owner. Then a year later, she says, now I want to sell the property. So ends up, they both get attorneys, and me and one other agent are going to try to get the opportunity to list the home. Now, the lady came in to me and met here at this office, came in and met with me, sat down. I took her through exactly the way with all of this stuff. I did it by the book, the way I'm teaching you guys. Took her through it. At the end, I explained all this to her, how it would all work. She wanted to overprice the property. Now, the reason she wanted to overprice the property was because she didn't really want me to be the agent. I was her brother's choice for the agent. She had her own choice for who she wanted to be the agent. And she didn't want to list with me. She wanted them. Well, I took her through all of this. And here's the funny thing. Before I even got to here, so when I got to this section here and I asked her on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you at? She told me she had just sold a property. So her personal residence she had sold that was in Sugar House. Now, and so she was living in the cabin, selling the cabin, and then going to go buy a condo up at Solitude. And she said, I wish I had sat down with you before I listed my house in Sugar House, because I would have listed it with you. So now remember, this lady's, her and her brother are fighting so much, they have attorneys that are going through all of this. She didn't want to list with me, yet I took her through this. And at the end, when I asked this on a scale of 1 to 10, she was like, I would have listed my house with you. So she said, I'm going to give you the chance first, but we're only going to give you, if I remember right, it was 3 or 4 months they were going to give me. I said, great, here's our pricing strategy. So on that one, I actually put it in an addendum to the listing agreement that the price would be adjusted every 3 weeks based on 0 showings, 0 offers. We would reduce the price 7%. If we've had some showings, and then I put in parentheses 1 to 3 a week, but no offers, we'll reduce the price 5%. Her attorney calls me up. We're not going to do that. And I said, well, why not? And he said, because essentially the way you've got this, we could keep reducing the price down to the point that somebody buys it for like $10, which, and I was like, you're an idiot, because what I already told you guys, let's say that the cabin was worth 400,000 and the price got to 300. If it's worth 4, I would have bought it. Like, we're not going to get down to $10. But he says, we're not going to do that. Instead, this is what we're going to do. If it's not sold on, and he said the date, whatever, 3 weeks from when the listing date was going to be, then we'll reduce the price. And he calculated what the 7% would be. He said, on this date, we'll reduce the price to this. And then 3 weeks later, if it's not sold, we'll reduce the price to this. And if 3 weeks later it's not sold, we'll reduce the price to this. I was like, that's even better than what I did. Like this, I would have had to go back and have them sign a price reduction, like the MLS change form. The way he did it, I don't even have to go back and ask for a signature. the contract says price will be reduced to this on this date. So just know, like, it's okay to put stuff like this even in an addendum to the listing agreement. This is what our plan is, and this is how we're gonna go after it. Okay, and it worked out great. In fact, we got it sold before we got down to the lowest price. So I was like, great, because I knew we would too, because of based on the CMA. So I'm gonna go through the CMA. We're then gonna land on what a price is. Once we've landed on what the price is, then is number 6, which is close. Now, you can already see, notice how many times throughout this, I was like, your home's gonna look great when we put it on the market because of all the curb appeal. If you're comfortable and confident with everything I've had to say, I'm gonna ask you to sign some paperwork, okay? On a scale of 1 to 10, where are we at? 10 being you're ready to sign the paperwork. Notice how many times I've kind of set up for this closing to where even right here, we've already said, yes, you're comfortable with me, or as long as we can agree on price. Okay, have we agreed on price, Joaquin?
Yeah.
Great. Did you want it to hit the market on Friday or Monday?
Friday.
Like, that's my close. So do you want to start this tomorrow or do you want to start on, Thursday? Like, that's your close. And it should be that simple of a close. Great. How did you spell your last name? And then I'm going to write it on the paper and have them sign. Make sense? Questions? Thoughts? Comments? You're speechless. Okay, but hey, here's the thing. So let's just wrap it with this. This works. And it's like I said, the lady on that, it was an adversarial relationship between her and her brother. In fact, I still don't think they've repaired their relationship to where they wouldn't talk to each other it was either through the attorneys or through me. Yet she showed up with her own agent, telling her brother, you need to interview my agent, I'll interview your agent. And at the end of this presentation, she said, I wish I would have talked to you before I listed that's where it works. If you'll do this, because it creates this connection and rapport where they feel trust, they feel safe, you separate yourself, you create the value, then it's easy to close.
So you don't talk about price at all, or you
Oh.
talk after close?
For the commission, you mean?
Yeah,
Yeah, so for me, hopefully it comes up somewhere along, I shouldn't say hopefully. Usually, that's probably a better way to say it. Usually it's gonna come up somewhere in here, like usually when right here I say, okay, so we've agreed on the price, should we get started? They may at that point say, well, what is the price? But a lot of times what I found at that point is they're like, okay, usually the commission comes up is when I'm going through the contract to have them sign it. So that's when I'd be like, okay, and so the commission's gonna be 7%. And then here's the thing, if you say it's 7% like you don't believe it, they won't believe it either. But if you do it as, okay, so on this section says we're listing the house from this date to this date. This section shows that the commission is going to be 7% plus a 595, and it says that it's due and payable at closing. And then I just go to the next section as it, like, if you pause, like this section says 7%.
What do you think?
Giving them a chance to.
Then they're going to be like, oh, okay. But I just kind of act like this is how it is. And then if they go, oh, wait a minute, I thought it was 6. I was, oh, okay. Well, so which of the things that we talked about did you want me not to do, Michelle?
But if you already created value and did your job, then that's not an issue.
Yeah, it shouldn't be an issue. Now, sometimes what I will do, and I'll show you this, I think I do this in the CMA class, is if they're concerned about it, I will go through and do a net sheet to show them, here's how much you're going to walk away with. Does that make sense? And then a lot of times they're like, oh yeah, that's good. Because at the end of the day, they typically don't care how much you're making. They care how much they're walking away with. And as long as they're good with what they're walking away with, then it shouldn't be a problem. But don't always just automatically go from 7 to 6. Like you could do 6.5. Let's do a 6.5%. All right.